to Mr. Greg Knox.
Thank you very much. My name is Greg Knox, and I'm not a public speaker. So unlike Mike Wilson, who did a great job before me, I've got plenty of notes. I'm just a guy who's having trouble with this mic. There we go. I'm just a hard-working slob who's been in manufacturing for about 20 years now. The reason I'm up here is to tell you a little story. Myself and my wife are originally from New York, and we moved to the Midwest about 20 years ago because we decided that we wanted to raise our children in the Midwest because of the family values and the morals in this part of the country. In 1995, our eldest child was starting kindergarten, so we decided we would move to Cincinnati, Ohio to raise our children, and also decided to start our own company. We did it the old-fashioned American way. We didn't take any of the bank's money. We didn't take any of the government's money. We took our life savings and we put it on the line. So I began working 80-hour weeks for more years than I care to remember. And at this point I have to interject that I am sick and tired of Biden and Pelosi and these people in this administration telling me that everyone is entitled to live the American dream. They are not entitled to live the American dream. I say everyone's entitled to earn the American dream. And like Mike said, I'm living proof the American dream is still well and alive. Now let's turn the clock ahead to late last year. Some of you already know this story, but for those of you who don't, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of it. I came into my office one morning at 6 o'clock, and the very first email I opened was from the president of General Motors, Troy Clark, and he told us that he expected all of us suppliers to call our local and state politicians and tell them we backed the bailout. And I guess that was probably a big mistake on his part to send that to me. See, I hadn't had my coffee yet, so my fingers went to the keyboard and just started to fly. And I did what I guess you'd call a spleen vent, and about an hour and a half later I looked, I said, oh my gosh. So before I hit the send button, on a whim I copied my mom, who's a retired housewife in New York. And she still lives there with my dad, who's an ex-New York City cop. And about 2 hours later, after I sent it to Troy Clark and my mom, I got an email from my mom, and she says, Greg, great letter. Can I share it with my friends? I figured, sure, share it with your knitting buddies. You know, they'll get a kick out of it. 2 weeks later, it was on Fox News. Never underestimate the power of a mother. So what was in the letter? Well, you can all pull it up on Google if you've not seen the letter, and it's still enjoying a very active life of its own. But just to give you some of the highlights, here's some of my response. Gentlemen, in response to your request to contact legislators and ask for a bailout of the big three automakers, please consider the following and pass my thoughts on to Troy Clark, President of General Motors North America. Politicians and management of the big three are both infected with the same entitlement mentality that has spread like cancerous germs in UAW halls for the last countless decades, and whose plague is now sweeping the nation, awaiting our new Messiah, President Obama, to wave his magic wand and make all our problems go away, while at the same time allowing this once great nation to keep living the dream. Believe me, folks, that dream is over. We are living through the inevitable outcome of the actions of the United States auto industry for decades. It's time to pay for your sins, Detroit. I attended an economic summit last week where a brilliant economist surprised the crowd when he said he would not have given the banks a penny of bailout money. Yeah, he said that would have caused short-term problems, but despite what people like George Bush and Troy Clark would have us believe, the sun would in fact rise the next day. And the following very important thing would happen. Where there had been greedy and sloppy banks, new, efficient ones would pop up. That's how free market system works, and it does work if we let it work. But for some reason, we're now deciding that the rest of the world is right and that capitalism doesn't work, that we need the government to step in and save us. Save us, my foot. We're nationalizing. And unfortunately, too many of this fine nation's citizens don't even have a clue that that's what's really happening. But they sure can tell you the stats on their favorite sports teams. That's important. Again, I could go on, but I really wouldn't be telling anyone anything they don't know in their hearts. I have 6 children, so I'm not unfamiliar with the concept of wanting someone to bail you out of a mess that you've gotten yourself into. My children do this on a weekly, if not a daily basis, as I did with my parents, and as my parents did with me, one of their greatest gifts, by the way. I make them stand on their own 2 feet and accept the consequences of their actions. I don't want to oversimplify a complex situation, but there certainly are unmistakable parallels here between the proper role of parenting and government. Detroit and the U.S. need to pay for their sins. Let the market correct itself, folks. Yeah, it'll be painful, but it's going to be painful either way. And the bright side of my proposal is that on the other side of it all is a nation that appreciates what it has and doesn't live beyond its means. It gets back to basics and redevelops the patriotic work ethic that made it the greatest nation in the history of the world, and finally turns back to God. Sorry, don't cut my head off. I'm just the messenger sharing with you the bad news. I hope you take it to heart. Greg Knox, President, Knox Machinery. You want to know what my definition of a bailout is? It's making me pay for corporate failures that are not my fault. How much more are we going to take, folks? You know, I titled that letter, "Bankruptcy is the Bailout," and that was back in November of last year. And to his credit, Barack Obama came to the same realization. The only difference between the two of us is that it didn't take me $50 billion to figure that one out. Actually, there are a number of differences between us. I'm a meat and potatoes conservative, not a Marxist or a fascist dictator. I don't know about you folks. Some of the most difficult days I've had over the last 20 years have been election days. I'm sick and tired of going to the polls and holding my nose with one hand while I punch Chads for the party line with the other. I know this past November I felt like I didn't even have a dog in the fight. My blood boiled throughout the debates as my supposed candidate constantly talked about how Ted Kennedy was his best friend and Barack Obama would make a fine president. I didn't agree with him then, and I sure don't now. To twist a line from Ronald Reagan, I didn't leave the Republican Party. It left me. Back when I wrote my letter and began doing TV and radio shows across the country, many folks thought I was overreacting with my warning that this current administration would try to make us into a socialist nation in the next 2 terms. I was wrong. They're trying to do it in the first term, and they're succeeding, people. I received this in the mail this past week. It's the Chapter 11 bankruptcy papers that were sent to all GM suppliers, such as myself. When I said bankruptcy is the bailout back in November, I was talking about real American bankruptcy, not this farce that our fascist dictator is foisting on a citizen, or should I say, his subjects. As a businessman, a manufacturing person, and an American citizen, my blood boils when I see the travesty that this administration is playing out with this bankruptcy right before our eyes. Obama has the unmitigated audacity to berate secured creditors who by law are first in line in the case of a bankruptcy for not accepting pennies on the dollar, and then helps rig a kangaroo bankruptcy court which proceeds to give 55% of Chrysler and 17.5%